Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Easter Pod. I'm your host, Corey Easterday, and on this episode, we are chatting with the one and only Tesho Akindele. Tesho and I had such a fun time chatting. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. We'll get into this more in our conversation, but he's basically an urbanist, a real estate developer at Camp North End, and he played Major League Soccer for 9 seasons with FC Dallas and then Orlando City, I believe, are the 2 teams, as well as the Canadian national team. Very well credentialed, accomplished as a pro athlete, but also accomplished the last several years in the urbanism and development space, especially through his work at Camp North End, which is one of the parts of Charlotte that my wife and I love visiting. As a matter of fact, as I'm sitting down recording this intro, we have friends from out of town visiting, and she's hanging out with them right now at Camp North End. So we love the work that Tesho does. I was grateful for the opportunity to sit down and chat with him about his passion for building better neighborhoods and using his platform to empower communities and the people that inhabit them to take a more active part in shaping a more walkable, sustainable, and affordable environment. So be sure to check out my conversation coming up with Tesho. I know that you will very much enjoy it. As always, our mission here with the Easter Pod is to bring you stories of rad humans that inspire you to engage the world with creativity and hope. Tesho is absolutely one of those humans, and so was my friend Brian LaFontaine, who I had on the episode prior to this one. Brian is an actor who has worked for over 30 years, been in many major film and TV productions, and is based here in Charlotte. I had a great time talking with Brian about his career in acting and all the behind-the-scenes stories. And he's a public speaking coach, and just his philosophy on presentation and all that he's learned through his 30 years in the industry. So be sure to check out that last conversation with Brian LaFontaine. And last but not least, you can follow the Easter Pod on social media at the Easter Pod. Be sure to, if you're not already, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a rating, leave a review. It really helps the show. Just sharing with friends on social media, sharing the link, all the things. Any feedback always means a lot and really helps the show. And shout out Easterday Creative at Easterday Creative, easterdaycreative.com, for joining forces with the Easter Pod to bring you these stories of rad humans. And special thanks, as always, to my friend Speak Seldom for doing the music for this show, and to my friend JD Laird and his company Token for helping to produce the Easter Pod. You can check out Token at Token Creative CO, I believe. Tokencreative.co is the website. Find Token on social media. And if you want to follow my work, at The Easter Dude, a lot of stuff with the podcast, nonprofit, stand-up comedy, Easter egg creative, music, all the good things. And last, check out Tesho on all social platforms, primarily Instagram and X, I believe. On X, he's at Tesho13, and on Instagram, where you can also find out about all his work. He posts a lot about the stuff we talk about in our conversation. So check out Tesho, get more connected with him. And without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Tesho Akindele. So in classic Easter Pod fashion, today's conversation and guest is one I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while now, and I couldn't be more excited to finally bring it to you, the audience. Once you hear the passion in my guest's voice, you'll understand why I'm so pumped, and frankly, it's a topic that certainly not as much as my guest, but I feel passionate about it as well. He's an urbanist, real estate developer at Camp North End here in Charlotte, a retired pro soccer player with a career spanning 9 seasons in MLS, and all around pretty cool dude, if I do say so myself, the handful of times we've met and hung out. So much more. Tesho Akindele, welcome to the Easter Pod. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. That was quite the intro. The passion you talk about, it's funny, other people, especially my wife, might label it as nerdiness or something like that. So I like passion, though. Passion is a good way to put it.
I have to use the word passion because it justifies my own extreme nerdiness for different topics. So if we just call it what it doesn't sound as cool as like, oh, we're passionate about this.
I like passion. I'll go with that.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for coming on the show. Super glad to have you here. I aim to please with each intro on the show because, I really want to bring on guests, and you definitely fit this bill. Like, kind of the ethos of the show is like, rad humans that inspire you to engage the world with creativity and hope. And I can think of no better guest and no better topic for that mission of the Easter Pod, because your whole life, like right now, everything you're involved in is literally like inspiring. It's creative, it's inspiring hope, it's building things better than they were before. It's very proactive, it's very involved, it's very like we're going to focus on the positive. So before we kind of dive into a bunch of other stuff, for those who are unfamiliar with what an urbanist is or what urbanism is, can you just kind of give us like a basic, like what that is, what that means?
Yeah, definitely. If you ask 100 different urbanists what it means, you probably get 100 different answers. But I guess big picture for me, it just means that you're a person who loves cities. You love, and the city is Charlotte, or it's New York City, or it's, even a smaller town like Davidson. So urbanism can kind of come in all shapes and forms. And I think one way I like to describe it, because the word urban is usually pretty loaded, I think people come with a whole bunch of their own baggage on like, what does urban mean? So for me, I think when I'm talking about urbanism, for me specifically, it's not building like 100 more cities like Manhattan. It's building 10,000 more main streets. Like I live in Noda, for example, and we got North Davidson Street right there on 36. Like every street or every neighborhood deserves like a little town center like that, where you can walk and we can grab coffee. I can grab coffee with my family there. I can grab dinner there. I can grab drinks there. I can go shopping there. We just need more places like that in the world. So for me, it's kind of really about getting 10,000 more main streets, giving everybody who wants it access to like a walkable neighborhood. Yeah,
I think for the little understanding I have of it as I'm growing in knowledge of it, I think that's a great way to describe it. And it's kind of funny because we originally got connected at our mutual friend Adam's seafood boil birthday party, which, one of the few times I've been to like a seafood boil, but I'm very glad I went. So we got connected, and it was just so funny because, you were asking me about myself, and, we were talking about a shared love of podcasting, and little did I know who I was talking to and what you're passionate about. And I loved your like curiosity, your passion for people. And I've seen that, if I can pump you up a little more after the intro, I've seen that kind of shine through in your work, is like you have this passion for people and you have this passion for urbanism, for building better neighborhoods. Where does that passion come from for you, do you think? Because that's pretty unique, I feel.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like I'm always the type of person who likes to be led by like the fire that's inside of me, So when I was growing up, I was good at science and math, so I ended up going to an engineering school, which is a pretty normal route, but I was a good soccer player. I always loved soccer. And so that fire was burning inside of me. Like I need to go for it and try to play soccer, And so I dropped out of school early, much to my parents' chagrin. They were not happy that I was almost done with my engineering degree and I dropped out. But I was like, the fire like inside of me is just I have to go for this right now. It ended up working out. I ended up having a long soccer career. And then, kind of towards the end of my soccer career, started learning more about urbanism, walkable neighborhoods, stuff like that. And that's where the fire was calling me to, And so I retired from soccer at 30. I probably could have kept playing longer, but, the fire inside of me was telling me to go somewhere else. And so I really do listen to that a lot, like just kind of follow the fire, follow the intuition that's inside of me. And that, that comes when I'm talking to individual people, like what's getting me fired up about what they're saying, or like in my life in general, like when I wake up this morning, what's the first thing I'm thinking about? And when I go to sleep, what's the last thing I'm thinking about? And does that align with what I'm doing throughout the day? And if there's a mismatch there between, I wake up and the first thing and I'm playing soccer, and maybe the first thing I'm thinking about is urbanism, and then when I go to bed, the last thing I'm thinking about is urbanism. Maybe that says you might need to go put yourself in a different position, So I'm one that just follows that fire, and I'm kind of not afraid to take a jump, whether it's, dropping out of school early or retiring from soccer early because the fire is telling me to do something different.
Yeah, I mean, kind of familiarizing myself with your story, listening to you on other podcasts and things, it really does seem like, and I feel like I can relate to this a lot personally, that you have these fires and you have these passions and you are following them, that there's been like kind of unexpected twists and turns. Like maybe 10 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined yourself kind of sitting in the position you are today. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, probably if you go like 12 years ago when I was just in an engineering school or whatever, I would have never even thought I'd have a pro soccer career. So my life has taken 2 gigantic twists and turns since then, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. Yeah, but that's what's great about life, It's just that, like, you don't know what's going to happen, but as like, I'm a very positive person, so I'm just like, I don't know what the future's going to hold, but I know it's going to be great, And I think that mentality has helped me a lot throughout life.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that mentality because I try to have the same one myself. One of the things I'm thinking about as I hear you talk about that is like, how do you feel that, because it means that you have like a certain, like I said, kind of talking about how we met and got connected, like you have an openness, you have a curiosity about people and urbanism and neighborhood, like all this kind of stuff. Like, how do you feel like that mentality like makes you a better urbanist, real estate developer, whatever? Like, how does it impact the way you kind of, I know how for me it impacts the way I look at people and conversations and like making connections and that openness to like building relationships and building bridges with people, all that kind of stuff. How does that impact the way you look at like building neighborhoods? And when you like walk into a space, like when we walked into here this morning, or you go to a neighborhood or whatever, how you kind of view it, like, because I think you view it through a lens probably different than most people.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of brings to like how and why did I get interested in urbanism in the first place? And so, when I was playing soccer, all I had done professionally my whole life was play soccer. And I'm like, this is going to come to an end sometime soon. And what am I going to do? And I was interested in finance. I was interested in education. Like I had just had my kids at that time. I was interested in the environment and affordable housing, like all these things. And I was like, how do I tie these things together? Ended up just meeting people through. I met a politician. I met some people in the YIMBY movement, and then I met a developer who kind of was also a self-described urbanist. And he really described to me, he was showing me around the city of Orlando how the different neighborhoods he's built have changed the city, and how these walkable neighborhoods that he had allowed people to walk to the coffee shop, walk to their kids to school in the morning, walk to their friend's house, different stuff like that. And what I realized is that when we're building cities, like there's the hardware there, like the neighborhood is the hardware, or the coffee shop, it's the hardware that allows like the software to bloom. And I think if we can do a better job as, say, developers or as city planners, whatever it may be, of building the hardware out there, it just gives everyone else the chance to thrive better. Like the software of life is kind of set up easier. So you have a podcasting studio here in a cool area, because somebody built that. Like they could have decided to not build it, and maybe you would have to do a podcasting studio at your house or whatever. But I think if you build the hardware of cities right, then the software of however people want to live, it kind of blooms easier. It's easier to make connections if you're kind of walking to your neighborhood coffee shop than if you have to get in your car and drive 30 minutes to the closest Starbucks or something like that. So I just really fell in love with the idea of, the way we build neighborhoods and cities. It's so taken for granted. Like nobody really thinks like go, if you're listening to this in your car or whatever, go look around. Like all the streets that you're on and the sidewalks and the houses you're passing, like somebody planned that and built that. And we just take that for granted, like, oh, it was somebody else. And I thought, like, why not me? Like, why can't I have kind of a say in how this gets built and how the hardware gets built that allows everyone else to thrive on top of that?
Yeah, I love that. I'm intently listening and thinking through everything you're talking about, because since we're still just kind of getting to know each other, for more context of my story, so where I went to college was in Canton, Ohio, at like a small evangelical Quaker Friends college. And I very much got into this idea of like Christian community development kind of thing. There's even like a Christian community development association I was really getting into after college. And it was a similar idea to what you're saying on like a personal and spiritual level of if we're going to, going to school for ministry and stuff like that, if we're going to like really be with people and love people, what does that look like in a practical setting? That's how I got involved in nonprofit work and stuff. The idea of going where people are, meeting them where they're at, like, and then looking at these things holistically, like neighborhoods, all that kind of stuff. And the deeper I got into it, the more I came to exactly what you're talking about, that hardware software dynamic of, what's walkable, what's in this neighborhood. I worked at it was called Lighthouse Ministries. It was like an after school program. So I would like work and live in like different urban areas in Canton, and it was a food desert, and there was like no laundromat. And even in the neighborhood I lived in, like Southwest Canton, the closest place I could walk to eat was like a Subway. There was not a lot going on walkability. And I even had friends talk about a walkable coffee shop, start a coffee shop called Walkie Talkie Coffee out of that whole idea of like being a walkable coffee shop in this neighborhood in 15th Street in Canton that didn't have anything like that before. It used to be I wrecked my car one time in college and had to take it there. It was like a body shop or whatever. And then they turned it into a coffee shop, and the way it transformed that community and neighborhood. So I've seen the lack and the deficit of that hardware you're talking about and how it can, negatively, you think about things like poverty or economic issues or whatever, it can negatively impact people because you're just kind of stuck in your bubble in the neighborhood, not a lot of resources, things like that. And I've seen the flip side of it too, where when you develop an after-school program or a coffee shop or like what we started doing with the laundry project, and you start to think about the physical like spaces and resources that exist in neighborhoods, and you think about it from that hardware perspective, it really does transform a lot of the like software, the organic, the people side of it. Have you seen that from when you started, even a few years ago, kind of really get into this, like your work at Camp North End stuff? How have you seen that dynamic kind of shift as like things grow and develop and,
I think, a really good example is just in my own life. So I moved from a not as walkable neighborhood in Orlando to Noda, which is like a very walkable neighborhood. And in Orlando, I wasn't the kind of person to take the train, for example, because there was no train for me to take anywhere. But in Noda, like I can walk to the train and take the train to the Charlotte FC game, and I do that, And in Orlando, I wasn't the kind of person to walk to the neighborhood cafe every Saturday because there was no neighborhood cafe for me to walk to. But here in Noda, we have Local Loaf right a couple blocks away from my house, and we literally, me, my wife, and my two kids, we go to Local Loaf every Sunday. And so I think I was the same person in Orlando as I am here, but just like what was available for me to do kind of dictated the way I lived my life. So now I have more of those moments with my kids. Like every Sunday we have this cool tradition where we get to walk to the local place and we get to see kind of the same familiar faces. We get to know the owners because that's available to us now in a way it wasn't in Orlando, or we live a block away from the park. And so we go to the park way more often than if we lived, a 5-minute drive away from the park, we wouldn't go. So just kind of the fact that where I live now is built out in a way that it really gives me so many options. It's allowed me to like experience different sides of myself, where in Orlando, I didn't necessarily feel boxed in, but I kind of was in some sense boxed in because of just what was available and convenient to me in my neighborhood. It really dictated my choices. Even, what am I going to get for dinner today? In Orlando, the closest place was McDonald's. So I got McDonald's a decent amount, and here where I live in Noda, there's no McDonald's that close. So we almost never get McDonald's, and it's like, it's just kind of, like I said before, people take for granted how the environment affects their decisions and stuff. And you really think like you're acting on your own free will, which you are in some sense, but also you're kind of acting within the constraints of what's been built and planned for you. And so I think, as a society, we need to think a lot more about intentionally building places to allow people to make, whether it's better choices, healthier choices, or make connections. There's like a loneliness epidemic. I don't think that's unrelated to the way that we've built our cities and kind of sprawled everything all the way out, instead of living a little bit closer to each other and kind of walking down the street and seeing your neighbor on the porch like you used to. So we kind of got to get back to really focusing on that as a society to allow people to make better choices.
Yeah, it's like building thriving neighborhoods, building thriving relationships. Like they really go hand in hand the way I'm hearing you describe it. And I mean, I can think back to these examples from my past and neighborhoods I've lived in and stuff, like in Ohio. I need look no further than the current neighborhood I live in. It deeply affects our lives. Like we have a 6-month-old daughter now. We have a dog, and where we live, excuse me, where we live is not it's not walkable to anything, and it's not walkable for like just going on a family walk. Like if we want to go on a family walk, we have to hop in the car and like drive 2 or 3 miles, which is always highly inconvenient and definitely affects things like our personal health, exercise, our connection to one another. You talked about the loneliness epidemic. Like everything you're tying together makes 100% sense when like you think about it in practicality, that it's easy to take for granted, like, oh, we hop in a car and we drive places. This is what's around. This is what's not around. We have to go over here to access this. And I think if in a perfect world, if things were designed with that intention you talk about, where it's making sure people have access and resources and things like that, I really do think it does connect people more on a relational level and, impacts our daily lives in an important way, because we think all that, like part of the reason we live where we live is so that, oh, we're a few minutes from everything we need to access in Charlotte, which is nice. But again, that downside of like, we can't just like go out our door and go on a walk as a family without fear of like cars whooshing by us or whatever, So I think the way I came up thinking about it from like in different leadership things I would be involved in is like, you have the organizational and the organic when you're thinking about like a business or a, corporate infrastructure. And I really do think it's that continued tension of hardware, software, organized, organic. But like, I really, for myself included, I think it's really easy to take for granted, like you said, and just not see the connection of how those two things like really play off one another.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things too to consider is like different people have different priorities and like visions for their life. Like not everybody wants to walk to the coffee shop on the weekend. Some people prioritize privacy or space more than that, which is fine. Like I'm not here to tell anybody how to live, but what I do know for sure is if you look at a city like Charlotte, for example, we might have 5 or so neighborhoods like Noda where you can kind of walk around, and we have hundreds of neighborhoods that are kind of traditional suburbs. And I just know that there is way more demand for the walkable neighborhoods than the supply that we've created. It's not 100%. Not 100% of Charlotteans want to live in a neighborhood like Noda for sure, but a much greater percentage do than have the opportunity. And you can just tell that by looking at the real estate prices. Like if you go to Noda, Dilworth, Plaza Midwood, wherever, the houses are expensive there, and it's because the demand is much higher than the supply of those neighborhoods. So I want to, in some sense, like democratize that, especially starting here in Charlotte. Like I want more people to have access to that. I want as many people who want that to have access to it in a way that's affordable. So like instead of having 5 of those, if we had 30 neighborhoods like that, they'd all be more affordable and way more people would have access to it. And still, anybody who wants to live, whether it's out in the country or out in the suburbs, kind of traditional, that's great, and they should have the opportunity to do that. But there's kind of ample opportunity for that already, and there's just a complete undersupply of like walkability.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense because we did a lot of. My wife was pregnant most of 2024, and we did a lot of house hunting, and it was just absolutely insane. It was like to see the one sheets you get or whatever, like for our range and our budget, where even 5 years ago, a house was like 3 to 5 times, maybe even 10 times in some extreme cases, like cheaper than it was now, and to see how it really does affect every aspect of life. But on a positive note, like one of the things that drew us to Charlotte in the first place, aside from being closer to my wife's family, was Charlotte really opened up my eyes because this is the first kind of bigger city we've lived in. Like Canton was more of a mid-sized city, came from like smaller towns in Ohio before that kind of thing. Obviously travel a lot, but as far as like day-to-day living, Charlotte was the first big place. And one of the cool things we tell people when people come visit is like, oh yeah, there's like these distinct neighborhoods. You can go to a place like Camp North End. There's all these things there or whatever. So I do like, I feel like there is a ton of demand for that because we've had demand for that in our own lives where we bring people here and it's kind of eye-opening, those 5 places that do exist, those neighborhoods. It's like, whoa, this is really cool. And I think your basic premise of like, why couldn't we do more of that? I really resonate with.
Yeah, and even, a lot of people, even in Charlotte, maybe you go to NODA and you think, oh, there's a great place to go out for dinner, but you don't imagine yourself living there. Or what happens with Americans too, like you go to college, a college campus is a walkable neighborhood. Like everybody should think back to their college experience, how great it was. You're walking, you got to run into your friends on the way to the cafeteria. You go run into your friends at the library. You run into your friends after school, and you just happen to go to a party or whatever. Like that's because it was built that way, Or you go, like I remember from my own life, I took a vacation in Amsterdam, and this was before I kind of had the language of walkability really in my mind. But I was like, man, I love it here. There's people everywhere. Like people are walking around. And I just didn't realize like it's because it was built that way, and it doesn't have to be a place that I can only vacation. Like if I want that, I should be able to have that right here in the U.S. Greatest country in the world. I should be able to live in a place like that if I want to.
I lived on campus all 4 years, so you describing it like a college campus, kind of the ultimate vision, really unlocks a lot of understanding of this for me. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here is like process in real time, because I've followed your work and stuff, but I'm still myself trying to grasp the concept. And I would imagine a lot of people haven't made those connections or thought about that. So I appreciate you kind of like gaming that out a little bit. But the idea of a college campus and how it affects those like personal relations. I mean, think about college. That's where people like meet their future spouse or your best friends for life or whatever. And like you said, it's because it's like built that way. If you're living on campus and doing all that stuff, you are connected. Everything's interconnected.
Even if you think of the difference between like a commuter college versus a school where you go and you live in the dorms on campus and stuff, like people have completely different experiences day to day, and they have different connections to the people they go to school with. Because, like I have a brother-in-law who goes to a community college that everybody just drives in, you go to school, you leave. He's not necessarily that good of friends with anybody in his classes, and that's because you're just not running into people other than in this one moment, versus a school where you go and you live on campus and you eat on campus and you do all this stuff kind of in the little bubble together. Like there's just way more chance for connections with people, and especially with people that you wouldn't have run into or spoken with otherwise, which is also really interesting. Like just kind of chance connections. I mean, me and you, like how would we have met before, Like, so it's just kind of those chance connections that living in interesting neighborhoods brings up is pretty special.
Yeah, and I'm somebody, I mean, by the very fact that I have this podcast, like I'm somebody that I love to meet people and connect with people. I thrive on it greatly. And so I've experienced my own kind of loneliness epidemic sometimes living in Charlotte, where in spite of, trying to be a man about town and like go out and do stuff, I'll be like, man, I feel like kind of sequestered sometimes, or just like, part of it's working from home or whatever, but it attaches to what you're talking about. There's not that like daily walking in like personal interaction. And I have to go physically spend time in spaces, whether it's like comedy open mic or whatever I'm into. Like I have to go there to like remember and thrive and build on those existing relationships. Like social media, and we can talk about your journey with social media, but it's so great for connecting with people in so many ways that we couldn't do before. But I feel like that's also kind of one of the downsides, generally speaking, is it's simulating the real life interaction that is so important to being a well-rounded person, having thriving relationships, and even like it affects everything professionally. Like I think about career-wise, so much of what I've done and what you got involved, it comes through those interpersonal relationships, who who like that's the same for a lot of people, So I think this is all interconnected. I want to tie it to Camp North End though specifically. So you work in real estate development at Camp North End. Why Camp North End? Why is Camp North End the model for you, the practical model of everything we're talking about?
So when when I finally was like, man, I fell in love with urbanism, fell in love with walkable neighborhoods, and the way I want to express that is to be a developer. So that happened while I was playing soccer, and then I knew I was going to retire. And so I guess in my mind, like the vision I had was build better neighborhoods. That was like my guiding light, build better neighborhoods. So I decided I'm going to retire. I'm going to move to Charlotte for my wife's job, and want to get into development. So I started looking like who in Charlotte is doing that type of relationship, that type of real estate development, who is building better neighborhoods. And obviously Camp North End popped up because Camp North End is 76 acres, 1 mile away from uptown Charlotte, and taking all of this, what was basically abandoned industrial space, and turning it into a neighborhood. Like this was a place that was literally barbed wire, surrounded by barbed wire fence for the longest time, a complete black box that nobody in the community was allowed into. the developers of Camp North End, which I'm now part of the team, took that fence down, opened up the public space, allowed businesses to move in, allowed coffee shops and small shops to move in, and now we have residents moving in. So literally turning what was kind of a hole in the community right in the middle of the city too, 1 mile away from the center of the city, turning kind of a hole into a better neighborhood. It's just 100% aligned with everything that I was kind of envisioning for my career. So I feel pretty lucky that I was able to go straight into that, because usually there's some kind of friction time between like when you start your journey and when you're able to like find the perfect way to fulfill that. And I don't know, like luckily I was able to just get right into it in a project like Camp North, and that it really checks all the boxes for kind of what I want to see more of in the world.
And you got connected to that even through kind of social media. Like, talk about how social media plays into your journey, like transitioning from soccer to what you're doing.
Yeah, so social media, it started with just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career after soccer. I was talking a lot on social media, and that's how I ended up meeting, like I said, the politician, the YIMBY people, the developer. That was all through social media. And then when I moved to Charlotte and I found out about Camp North End, I was like, okay, how do I get connected with the people who are a part of Camp North End? And then I found Damon Hemmerdinger, the president of ATCO, who's developing Camp North End. He's on Twitter. So I just shot him a DM and I told him, hey, I'm about to retire from soccer and move to Charlotte, would love to introduce myself. And, I'm sure what he did first was go look at my social media and like scroll through my page, and he saw nothing but me talking about walkable neighborhoods and how much I love them and like kind of what I've been thinking about these types of things. So I think that was like really proof of passion, which I needed in that moment, because I had no professional resume. I look worse on paper than a new college grad. But I really think the reason he gave me a shot was because I was obviously like very interested, not just in real estate development, but like the specific type of development that they were trying to accomplish. And, I think he said, all right, I can teach this guy the technical skills, but you can't teach everybody passion. And luckily, I think that social media helped me because it was like a public resume of like a proof of passion. Like I've proved 4 years that I'm really passionate about this. I'm not just trying to get a job. I want a job building better neighborhoods. And that shone through. And I guess that's why Damon hired someone with no experience in real estate development to join his team.
That's awesome. I love that. And I have to say, I love the work that you guys have done at Camp North End today. Like, that's where my wife and I took our 5-year anniversary photos in like 2019. And like, it's been a big part of our story in Charlotte, of just like one of the areas we attach ourselves to or that we've been to a lot. And it's been really cool to see it develop over time. And I had no idea about kind of the background of it until I was like researching your story a little bit more and then hearing you talk about it, of truly how it's developed over time. I mean, we've seen, increments over the last like 6 years or so, but to think of where it started to where it is now, I mean, it is like its own walk. I see foot traffic there all the time. Like it can be like a random Tuesday afternoon or something, or there's a big event going on. Like there's always like shops and coffee, and it's a place that when we have visitors from out of town, we'll take them to kind of show like, oh, what are we going to do? Let's go hang out at Camp North End. Like, so I think I've really I love that for you, that you get to have such a hand in like shaping that.
Yeah, and that's the goal too. What you said, like we want people to think, like if your family's in town and you want to show them the best of Charlotte, we want you to immediately like think of Camp North End and come be like, this is the best of Charlotte, And I think that we're hitting that for a lot, because I hear very similar stories from a lot of people where families in town, or you're looking for something to do, and it's just like that's the place that kind of captures the best of Charlotte, because over at Camp North End, you have small local business owners. Like a lot of our businesses are owned and operated by the people, by Charlotteans. Like the plant store, Jules, she's in the shop every day, operating the plant store. Coffee shop, Chandler, he's in the coffee shop every day, operating it. And I think that's unique in Charlotte. And then the artist kind of scene, you're surrounded by art, but then you're surrounded by artists too, which is a big part of Charlotte. And then even something that, Charlotte's kind of known as a bank town, sometimes said in a derogatory sense or whatever, but that business is also a very important part of the character and like the engine of Charlotte. And we have big, serious businesses there, like we have Ally Bank and Google Fiber and Centene. So we kind of have, in my opinion, a really good cross section of Charlotte, all these different types of people interacting and bumping into each other. And, it's like what happens when the banker meets the artist for coffee someday. Like, I think magical things have happened through that, like through people just being at Camp North End and running into each other. And more of that will happen, especially as people live there and as we keep developing the project and more people are kind of spending time there.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the local aspect. I think it's really important to know because you might be listening like, well, I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's kind of key to a lot of the vision that you're talking about when it comes to urbanism in an ideal sense is it really does create the space. And ideally you would have like that local aspect, that local connection. So there's always my wife and I are small business owners. Like there's always that emphasis on supporting small business, supporting local. And a place like Camp North End really gives you an opportunity to do that. Cause I don't know if there's even like a national chain in Camp North End.
Yeah, no, we're very intentional about finding like the local business owners and trying to give them a shot in whatever ways possible. I think like Hex is a really good example where these guys, they started a small business roasting coffee, and they were kind of in an industrial part of our campus, just roasting coffee, and then they started selling a few cups of coffee here and there, and then they grew to now. If you go to Hex Coffee at Camp North End, it's in my opinion, it's the most beautiful coffee shop in Charlotte, and it's a restaurant too. So they blew it up from like a little tiny roastery in a small building, like very janky industrial building. And we kind of have been along for the ride with them to grow into what's now like a wonderful restaurant, coffee shop, and they sell wine there too, so, and that's what we want that opportunity for more people, like there's a ton of creative people in Charlotte, and, a lot of people just need a chance, and they need a chance, they need a little bit of flexibility, they need somebody who's like on their team, willing to support them through the ups and downs, and I think we've been able to do that, with a bunch of different entrepreneurs, and I feel really lucky for that because entrepreneurs are really kind of like they're the heroes of society because they're putting it all on the line and just taking a shot. So I feel very lucky that we're able to create space for those types of people who are really getting after it and trying to bring their full selves to the world.
I love that. And I love Hex. That every time I go into Hex, like even the old location, but the new one at Camp North End, it just speaks to my soul. It's the kind of place I love to hang out. As somebody that's traveled a lot, and like one of my favorite things to do when I travel is like find a cool coffee shop and stuff like that. So, but I love everything you said about the entrepreneurs and the community there. My wife and I are friends with, a lot of or I shouldn't say a lot, but like a few of the business owners in Camp North End are like personal friends. And it's just cool to see like how it creates that space for people to like connect. And I love the idea of just being able to go to one spot and support like all these local businesses at one time and everyone that's there, like the ice cream, the plant shop, that, it could go down the list. Like there's so many cool. And one of the things I was thinking about listening to you talk is, again, making that connection of like my past background thinking about community development from like a nonprofit or church kind of mentality. One of the things we would talk about a lot as I would go to conferences and things is this idea of a third space. So you think of Starbucks kind of popularized it, but really any coffee shop it's a third space. The idea being that like people come here to have community and connect and meet. And so one of the things I work on, through the nonprofit Current Initiatives that I'm the national director for is it's the Laundry Project. We actually have one coming up this weekend with Mint City Collective and George Marks and our Charlotte FC connections. But that's one of the things we'll talk a lot about there is we want to meet a tangible need for families of clean laundry, but also as it's been shaped and built over the last 15 years, like that organization, it's how do you turn the laundromat into a third space? So we call it like turning the laundromat into a community center of hope is one of the phrases we use. And just that idea of the spaces people gather as being like paramount and important and how it impacts, like we talked about, like supporting local businesses, meeting people you wouldn't otherwise meet, just how it helps you like thrive as a person. Do you ever think about it in like specific terms of what you're creating, like being that, like you've alluded to, but in your planning conversations, do you ever think like, oh, this is like a third space where people are going to like meet and gather intentionally away from home or work or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I'm sure maybe most people are familiar with what a third space is, but if you think about, your first space is your home, your second space is probably your work. So where's that third space that you go and just kind of can hang out with people. You just, like the local pub in some sense. And absolutely, that's how we think about what we're doing at Camp North End. And, even just in real estate development more generally, that's what I'm trying to create. I think what we've done a good job of at Camp North End is creating multiple third spaces that people can interact with in different ways. So, for example, me and you are both parents of young kids. We have the turf area in Camp North End with these big Lego blocks, and there's music playing. Great third space for parents to go to, because you can just go out there on a Saturday, get a drink, your kid's safe, they're playing with the blocks, they're playing with other kids. It's amazing. Then we have under the water tower, we do a lot of like live performances over there. Great third space. You can come if you're like a young couple or whatever, maybe an older couple or whatever, and you're looking for a good thing to do on a Friday night. You go watch live music for free at Camp North End, or it's going to the coffee shop, and maybe you have to pay for that experience, but that's a place where you can go get a business meeting, or you can go meet up with your friends after work for a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever it may be. So I think we've intentionally created third spaces, and we've done a good job, in my opinion, of creating third spaces that meet lots of different people's needs and at different price points, all the way from free to, the Revelry, which is an amazing event venue. So there's kind of like a whole range of experiences and third spaces that we've been able to create there.
Yes, and thank you for actually describing what third space is. So I'm sure you catch yourself doing this sometimes, where you can get so caught in the lingo that you're like, oh, wait a second, actually describing.
And so for me too, that's one of the main issues that the urbanist community has, is not just explaining things in a very clear way. And so I always try to think of it as like, if I'm just talking to my mom who doesn't know anything about this yet, like how would I explain this to her? Because you have a lot of people who have been thinking about building better neighborhoods for a long time, a lot longer than me. They're a lot more knowledgeable than me. But in my opinion, there's usually like a gap between the way those people talk and the way that normal people think about the world. Like they're just talking past each other, And so really what I try to do with my somewhat limited understanding of this stuff really is just be that bridge between the experts who I know less than, and just maybe someone who hasn't thought about this yet, and just kind of be that bridge to take you one step further towards thinking about third spaces, or towards just thinking about, why isn't my neighborhood more walkable? Why can't I walk to the park or to the coffee shop? And then you start to learn it's because zoning, and like it's literally illegal to build a coffee shop in the middle of a neighborhood type of thing. So I'm really trying to see myself as like a bridge between somebody who hasn't thought about this yet and the people who have been thinking about this for a long time.
I think you do a great job of it, honestly, because I'm an example of that. Like I've thought about it in other ways, as we've talked about, but I like you sharing and the ways you've shared, and like you're passionate about your work has helped me make a lot of connections and understand it a lot better than I probably would have otherwise. So to that point, you mentioned a few times, what are YIMBYs or NIMBYs? Like, what is that in that dynamic?
Yeah. So, I think that NIMBYs maybe started first. So NIMBYs are people who are like not in my backyard. So, if people want to build more housing down the street from you, you're like, well, I want more housing in Charlotte because there's more people moving to Charlotte, but not in my backyard. So that's kind of what a NIMBY is. And then the YIMBY movement came later and said, no, we do want it in our backyard. Like, we need more housing in this city, or the YIMBY movement really started in California, but it's like, we need more housing here because there's a shortage of housing. There's lots of people who want to live here. We don't have enough housing for them. Like, let's build that housing, and let's build it, like, literally, yes, like, in my neighborhood, in my backyard. So I'm kind of a self-described YIMBY. And even I moved to NODA to fulfill that. Like, in NODA is a neighborhood where they're developing stuff all the time. Like, just 2 blocks away from me, they built 2 apartment complexes in the last 2 years since I've been here. I love it. Like, that's more neighbors. They built, all of them have retail. So there's like a Greek place, there's a Peruvian place coming, there's a physical therapist, like all that stuff got built. And like, I'm excited that that's happening in my backyard, like literally like in my neighborhood. So I'm definitely on the YIMBY side of things. But the YIMBY-NIMBY dynamic is an interesting one for sure.
That's probably why we get along, because I feel like both our general demeanors is to be on the YIMBY, like the positive, like the proactive, looking forward side of things. Talk a little bit about affordable housing, because that's a topic so to help you out also a little bit. So my background is I came from like a like kind of a middle class family. We had a lot of stuff kind of happen in our lives to really put us in a position where we were, my mom was a single working mom. Like, we'd have to go to food kitchens sometimes, like soup kitchens. Like, we were kind of on the higher end of like the poverty spectrum, but like really struggling to make ends meet. So that's where a lot of my passions have lied. And I know that there's that crossover like in the nonprofit spaces, what you're doing, talking about affordable housing. Just help me, I guess, and our listeners like understand about that and your perspective on it.
Yeah, so there's a few dynamics. Like one is literally the price of housing is just controlled like everything else by supply and demand. So, in Charlotte, there's a certain amount of houses, and as more people move to Charlotte, the demand is going up and up and up and up. So the price is going to go up because the demand is getting higher than the supply. So from a development point of view, what I'm saying is we need to just build more housing so that the demand and the supply stay in line, right? That like building more housing makes housing more affordable because you're adding to the supply to meet the demand. There you go. Another thing to think about with affordable housing is building a house. There's like two components. One is the cost of the land, and one is the cost of like the sticks and bricks of it, right? And so one thing that urbanists really advocate for is zoning changes. So like in most of Charlotte, for 100 years, it was basically illegal to build anything but a single family house in most of Charlotte. They changed that now that you can build up to a triplex on most lots, but allowing you to build more houses on a piece of land also makes housing more affordable because it makes the cost of the land more affordable. So a good example is, let's say a plot of land costs $1 million. It's in the best location in Charlotte, whatever. So if you can only build a single family house on that land, the land is $1 million plus you have to build the house. It's a $2 million house, But if you could build 10 houses on that land, or you can build, let's say you could build 10 houses, then the land is only $100,000 per house. And basically like rezoning, like upzoning in that way allows everyday people to compete with the wealthiest people for land. And so that's something that really plays into affordable housing in a way most people don't think about, is changing the zoning to allow more density, like especially in our core neighborhoods close to amenities, allows more affordability because the more houses you can build per land basically makes the land cheaper and brings the price of housing down.
What about transportation?
Transportation's another important thing too, because it unlocks the amount of neighborhoods that are considered close to amenities. Like if it's easy to get, like right now there's a train that goes straight from Uptown to UNC Charlotte. So if you live anywhere along that train line and you work in South End or in Uptown, it's a very easy commute. You can just hop on the train and get to that commute or get to the city. So it like having good transportation, especially like public transportation, really unlocks the number of locations that are kind of desirable in that they're close to amenities. So like the Sugar Creek area, which is one station up from where I live, before it wasn't right on the train line, so it's kind of not too easy to get to South End from Sugar Creek, but now it's very easy. You just hop on the train and you're down there in 10 minutes, So like transportation has made that a more desirable area to live because it's now closer and easier to get to other parts of the city that are interesting, like South End or Uptown, where the jobs are and where a lot of the amenities of the city are. So transportation really unlocks different parts of the city by just making it easier to get to the things you want to get to.
So kind of a pivot, but kind of not, because I ultimately want to get to an idea you've talked a lot about of like athletes as urbanists. But to do that, I want to touch on, maybe I should have done this at the beginning of the conversation, but kind of touch on your athletic background. So you are a retired MLS player. You're actually just as a interesting anecdote, you're the third MLS player that I've had on the show. So
I'm honored.
I did not grow up a huge soccer fan, but just over the last, I'd say probably like 5-6 years or so, even a little bit longer. One of my good friends is the goalkeeper currently for Austin FC, Brad Stuver. And through him and through, Laundry Project and other things and getting to know like George Marks, Charlotte FC, I've had him on the show and we've worked on the Laundry Project together. So just kind of having friends that do it, I've gotten more into the game, become more of a fan. So I like that my life kind of just turned into, like, talk about unexpected turns, just like being in the MLS world more and more. But you played for 9 seasons, FC Dallas, Orlando City, won Rookie of the Year in 2014. I was like, dang, all right, Tesho. Played for the Canadian national team, broke Charlotte fans' hearts. Several, I can bring that up, scoring the winning goal against Charlotte in the U.S. Open Cup. But anyway, so talk a little bit, for those who aren't familiar, talk a little bit about your playing career, and then, kind of shift into the idea of making that connection, because we talked about this when we first met, even your passion for athletes as urbanists.
Yeah. Well, all right. So Brad Stuver and George Marks, great soccer players, but they're both goalies. Goalies are their own breed of soccer players. So I'm the first non-goalie, and I'm taking that mantle. Goalies I'm always friends with the goalies, but they're their own type of soccer. They'll admit it too.
This is my ignorance of the game, but there's I should have guessed there's factions. And
the goalies they're crazy. They're on their own goalkeeper island, as it were. But so, I played soccer for a long time, and like you said, I played in different cities. I played for the Canadian national team, and what that allowed me to do was travel a lot. In some sense, it forced me to travel a lot. So when you play in MLS, you get to go everywhere from Miami all the way up to Vancouver, New York, now San Diego. So you literally cover the entire country and get to see a lot of the best cities across the whole country. And then with the Canadian national team, we played different countries, so I went to the Caribbean a lot. I went to every single country in Central America to play soccer, which is an amazing experience. And so throughout my travels, I was just able to really see how different places build cities, in a way that most people don't. Like a lot of people, you kind of grow up in your neighborhood and you just think like, oh yeah, this is normal and this is kind of how it has to be. But traveling so much really forced me to realize like, oh, there's a lot of different ways that we could be doing this, So that's kind of, I think, what really got my wheels turning at first was just seeing so many different types of people in different types of places, and like how, like New York is a very dense city, and it's a lot of hustle and bustle versus, some other cities that are like less dense and more slowed down. Like it impacts the people who live there, like how it's built. So that kind of got my wheels turning. And then, just like as the idea of athletes as urbanists is, to me, like, there's this idea of the housing theory of everything. Like the way we build housing in neighborhoods trickles into everything. And I think I've probably given 20 examples of that already throughout this conversation. So I think that more athletes should think of like advocating for urbanism as a way to give back, like kind of whatever cause you're interested in, like building better neighborhoods will help make that cause easier to succeed in the world. And athletes are in a great position of being like tastemakers of society. Like if an athlete wears some new shoes, like people start to think those shoes are cool. If an athlete starts to talk about new music or something, people think that's cool. So athletes have a unique position to be able to influence like the minds of their fans in a good way. And I really can't think of a better way for more people to use their platform than by kind of advocating for building better neighborhoods. Like one example I think of is, if like in the city of Cleveland, let's say
shout out Ohio.
Yeah, shout out to Ohio. Let's say it's illegal to build anything but a single family home across like 90% of the city or something, 75% of the city, like a huge portion of the city. If LeBron James, for example, said, "Hey, this doesn't really make sense. We should like rethink the way we're zoning and building our city." The city, like he could change the entire way they build the city, and like that's an extreme example, but Charlotte FC players or Panthers players or Hornets players, something like if these types of people start speaking up about the way we build our city, like, and whether they do it because they care about affordable housing or because they care about access to parks or whether they care about the environment or they care about more people having access to a laundromat, like whatever your reason for speaking on it, I think that the more kind of athletes talk about these issues, it's like a shortcut to getting into popular culture. Like if someone hears like an architect talking about the way to build a city, they're like, oh, that's kind of nerdy. It's not cool. But if you hear your favorite soccer player or basketball player talking about it, I think a lot more, people are likely to listen. So to me, there's a huge opportunity there for athletes to just use their platform to advocate for building better neighborhoods and then like with the outcome of promoting whatever causes that are really important to them.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, like in your own story, you probably gained this bigger platform to talk about urbanism through you talked about this, I can't remember if it was on air or off air, but just like through your playing career, people are instantly kind of like, oh, I'm interested in what he has to say, regardless of what that might be. And the way you're channeling it to craft a legacy beyond the game is like a topic that whenever I've had athletes on the show, I'm always frequently interested in, because you think about an athletic career over the course of an entire lifetime, it can be such a like short amount of actual time that thinking about what you're doing off the field is like super important. And you doing that for yourself and then encouraging other athletes to do it, I think is a really important thing. And yes, I'm glad you pointed out. You are a forward. You're forward. I usually talk to the people. It's a very different mentality. Stopping the goals. You're the one actually scoring the goals.
And it might, honestly, that might be a little bit of the optimist pessimist kind of thing. Goalies can be optimists too, but as a forward, you kind of have to naturally be very optimistic because you have to think like, I'm going to do the hardest thing there is to do in this game and score a goal. And even like if you've been playing a terrible game for 90 minutes, I used to always think like, all I need to do is one good thing, and it's all going to be okay, So that kind of optimism has been inside of me, even from a soccer playing point of view, where it's just like I'm really living out that optimistic life.
Yeah, and gosh, I really wish I had paid more attention to soccer growing up because I still have to like look up what some of the positions. I mean, I watch Charlotte FC all the time. I go to games. I'm just like I spent so much time invested in like NBA and NFL that it's still an ongoing. Like even when I had Brad on the show, I did a whole segment with him of like, all right, teach me the game of soccer. Yeah. That's funny. And you mentioned LeBron. I think interestingly enough, like through the LeBron James Family Foundation, like House 330, like he's built different things in Akron, around where I grew up, that are similar to like what we've talked about, like just transforming. There was one old space that was like Megan and I photographed a wedding there. It was this big venue that had kind of become defunct, and they sold it to, and they transformed it into this like community hub and resource for the community. So, I think you're 100% on with that. Like athletes using their platform to kind of develop these things.
And stuff like that doesn't just happen, like an old building doesn't get turned into something new, like just at the snap of their fingers. Like somebody needs to go out and like design it and plan it and raise money for it and like see like project manage throughout it. And that's why I became a developer, really, because I was like, I don't want to just wish that our cities get built better, but I want to like make sure our cities get built in a better way. And the developers are the ones, really, really doing that.
Yeah, I love the action part of that. I had a guest on previously on the show that we talked about like I think it's the Home Depot or something, that motto, like doers get things done, and just as a concept for creativity. But for what you're talking about with urbanism and planning and city development, like there is a lot of action involved and a lot of like being willing to be in the minutia and the details and the stuff that doesn't seem as, sexy or appealing. It's like just kind of the daily grind. I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a professional athlete, but that it's somewhat similar to that daily grind as an athlete, to kind of focusing on these things that can seem maybe unimportant, in the day to day, but that have a bigger and longer term impact.
Yeah, it's in some ways it is similar, just like that. Like you have to just get up and you have to, bring your full self to work every day, and you have to try to get a little bit better, and like problems inevitably arise and you have to figure out how to solve them. Like on the soccer field, the problem is you're down a goal or whatever, somebody stole the ball from you. How do you get it back? How do you get the goal back? How do you get the ball back? And then in development, it's like, oh, these windows, they don't fit anymore the way we design, or the city won't allow us to build what we wanted to build. How do we come up with a new plan? So you got to just on the fly figure out how to solve the problems. One thing though that's different is in soccer, a lot of times you start the season, you build up to a crescendo of like hopefully winning the MLS Cup. In my scenario, like you want to win the MLS Cup, and if you don't, you go to the off season, you start over at zero again. So it's kind of like a cycle of like building up, and then you start over, and then you build up and you start over again. Versus what I really like about kind of now being in the real world and in development is, we're building Camp North End, and that's forever. Like that's really shaping the city forever in a way that like all the decisions we make today are building on the decisions we'll make tomorrow, and the decisions that were made 5 years ago by the team, like those seeds that they planted back then are still blooming. And so I really like that too about development, is like it's not just going to be done in a year. Like this is something that's going to get better and better and better over time as we keep improving, but as more people come to the city, as more people have access to the space, it's just going to keep getting better.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that, and that's one of the concepts I love about your work is that long-term impact, like I think about that all the time with the stuff I'm involved in, is like it's good to, things that have like a short term, but to me, like tangibility is the name of the game. Like taking tangible action that is going to continue to kind of outlive us, in a way.
Yeah. For me too, it's like life is actually really long. People like to say like life is short, but life is really long, especially like if you just do a little bit every day. So for me, like my goal is to make Charlotte into a more walkable city, which is it's a huge goal. You know, if I want to take us from 5 walkable neighborhoods up to 30, it's a kind of like an impossibly large goal. But you can start with doing that in one place, which is what I'm doing. Like I'm focused for the last couple of years, and will continue to be focused on making Camp North End into the 6th or whatever number you want to say, the next walkable neighborhood in Charlotte. And then we got to keep going from there. You know, like maybe that inspires another developer somewhere else in Charlotte to be like, I'm going to do my own version of that. And then, you know, then there's like a domino effect of that happening. But if I was like, man, how do I snap my fingers and get Charlotte from 5 walkable neighborhoods up to 30? It's an impossible goal, you know, but you just need to just start, like just start get it one more in there, like start moving in the right direction. And then, you know, I'm only 32 years old. I got 100 years left with the way medicine's going. I got a lot of time left to build walkable neighborhoods out here. So there's a long time to make a lot of difference. And I think if more people thought about it that way, like you don't need to be done tomorrow, and you don't even necessarily want to be done tomorrow. Like you want to just kind of continue to work towards your goals, like get a little bit closer every day and kind of follow that guiding light, or, you know, that have an infinite goal that you're just always chasing. So I think that long-term mentality is really important.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because I find that even though this show has, you know, talked to people from doing different things, different backgrounds, whatever, I always find that there's a lot of common threads amongst people that are like high achievers or creative or seek to get things done or have, you know, reached any level of success in their career, whatever their chosen field, is like taking those small steps and like seeing how it impacts the larger picture. And like you said, approaching life from a long-term, life is long development aspect, development of your character, development of your relationships, development of your neighborhoods, like seeing it from that angle and being willing to, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, What About Bob, with Bill Murray. It's like Bill Murray is playing a very psychologically disturbed, like neurotic kind of character in a funny way. Yeah. But his psychologist, that Dr. Leo Marvin, for those who've seen the movie, he goes to where he's vacationing at one point and just keeps shouting Dr. Leo Marvin to like try to get his attention. But he wrote this book called Baby Steps. And so Bill Murray's character takes it to heart of like, all right, like almost too literally, baby steps to the door, baby steps to the kitchen, baby, you know. And I think, but on a serious level, I think about that all the time of how have I gotten anything done, like with the big vision, or how have you gotten anything done? It really is just taking those baby steps with that like long-term vision in mind of what's the thing I need to do today? Who do I need to talk to? What's the next step? And then the next, and then you kind of see it snowball, and you look back and you're like, oh wow, this is kind of cool what has been built by just that like daily like willingness to take each step.
Yeah, and you definitely don't need to be in a rush, because you need to do it in a way that's sustainable. Like if you really want something big to happen, if you try to sprint to the finish line, like you can't sprint a marathon, basically. You have to go at a pace that's sustainable. So like don't beat yourself up if you didn't get to a crazy amount done today, but you know, like you took that baby step, that's great. That's a huge win. You know, that sustainability is often overlooked when people are chasing their goals.
I love that you talked about. I love the soccer puns, chasing. But I love that you talked about sustainability. I'm tracking with you so much. Like I think you're. If I may be so bold, I think you're approaching all this the right way. I think it is the right way to approach things, because I'm only 36, so I'm not too much older than you. But we're like over time, when you've seen things not built sustainably, or people creating, or kind of like you're doing things in a way that's not sustainable, to me, I'm like, there's no other way to do it but to try and do it in a way that's sustainable.
Yep, 100%. And even I think, you know, sometimes like hitting your goals too early can also leave you scared. Like there's actually an example from soccer. There's a guy who he played on a similar team to me, but this guy won everything. He was like best player in the world, won the World Cup, and he had this moment in his life that he's like, oh my God, like now what do I do? And was scared in some sense. So there's like something to the idea of like setting these big goals and just like chasing them and enjoying that pursuit. You know, too many people are like, they want to hit that goal and then maybe move to the next goal or whatever, but the whole thing is the pursuit of the goal. You know, like just every day, like for me, I go to Camp North End every day. I'm looking around like, how can we make this a little bit better? And I love that. I love that process of like pursuing the goal of making Camp North End an amazing place. Or every day I wake up and I'm thinking like, what can we do to kind of get more people in Charlotte thinking and talking about walkable neighborhoods? And, you know, like if I find like you and I think I've like pushed you a little bit more in my direction, like I love that pursuit of like the bigger goal and, you know, fall in love with the pursuit more so than like hitting that end goal.
100%. I love achieving and creating and all that kind of stuff and having like big visions and goals that you achieve, but I am awful at actually enjoying the process. I have to remind myself constantly, like in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm going to sit down and record with Tesho and do that and put it out there. And I always have to actively remind myself, like, relax, enjoy the conversation. This is like, to your point, a lot of the achieving is like, you know, it's the friends we made along the way. It's like, it is the journey, you know, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Yep. And it's funny because like some of this stuff is cliche, but it's cliche because it's true, you know, like all this stuff it is cliche, but it's because it's true and it's worked and it's time tested.
Well, speaking of soccer puns, as we kind of wrap up here, do you follow MLS still? Do you have like a favorite team? Do you pay attention to Charlotte FC? Like kind of where are you at with enjoying the game now?
Yeah, definitely follow MLS still. I remember, I played in the 2022 season, and then the 2023 season was the first one I was out. And I remember the first game week they were back, I'm sitting on my couch. I had a 6-pack of Mike's Hard Lemonade. Love Mike's Hard. And then I was like, I felt good. You know, it was like, it felt good to, like, I loved my soccer career and I had a great time, so many good memories, but it also felt good to just be a fan of the game for once. And like, I wasn't under pressure this weekend, like I just get to sit down and drink my mics and watch the game. So huge fan of soccer still. And I have 2 young boys now. And so like, it's exciting getting them to enjoy the game. My older son, he loves it. He's wanting to play with me every single day after school. We're playing in the parking lot. We're playing at the park. I got to take him to his soccer game. So I love being like a soccer dad now, and I love just being a fan. In terms of specific teams, I got a real soft spot in my heart for Orlando City because a lot of my friends are still there that I played with. And then there's my coach, Oscar Pareja, who coached me for almost all of my career, is still there. So huge fan of his in Orlando City. But then now I'm in Charlotte. I'm Charlotte everything. I'm also a big fan of Charlotte FC. I've been lucky enough to get to know a lot of the guys on the team since I moved here, and then also some of the people in the front office who I played against back in the day. I've gotten to reconnect with. So big fan of Charlotte FC, and then just all Charlotte sports. Like now I'm here. I'm going to be here for a long time. So I'm a fan of Charlotte sports generally too.
Yeah, I'm from Ohio, so I'm still big on the Ohio. Like the Cavs were in town last week or the week prior, and I was like, yes, all in. So I would say I didn't have like a strong attachment to an MLS team outside of like whoever my friends play for. So Charlotte has kind of like claimed that spot in my heart. I think mostly I didn't go a lot or maybe at all when I lived in Ohio. So like getting to go to matches at Bank of America and stuff, it's really captured that, and I love that. What you shared about playing with your sons or whatever, because my daughter's only 6 months old, but I've started to think about that so much all the time, even from when I found out my wife was pregnant. Is like, wow, what bonds are we going to share? Like, what are things that I love or I'm into that will rub off on her that we'll be able to like connect with together? So just hearing you talk about that, I got that that hit my dad emotions.
Yeah, and for me, one thing that I've tried to do as a dad is just like always say yes when my kids want to do something with me. So like even when I love playing soccer. So whenever they're like, let's play soccer, Dad, I always say yes. But right now my younger son, he always wants to play tag, and I don't necessarily want to play tag but all the time with a 3-year-old. But like I just try to say yes as much. And it, like you said, it's like that's not necessarily a bond I would have thought we created, but like we're creating that bond. And so I've really enjoyed that about parenting too, just being able to like, somewhat impose my passions onto them. And like, they both are kind of athletic, sporty guys, but also kind of go and see like them blossom to their own person and help support them in that as well.
Well, I was going to ask you for dad advice. I think that's great advice right
just,
there.
Yeah, say yes, especially like, cause there's going to be moments when you're tired or you're bored of doing the same thing 100 times or whatever. So in my, like just having that kind of rule for myself, like I will say yes when they want to like spend some time with me has been really helpful. So then it helps me reframe like, oh man, instead of like, oh my gosh, we got to play tag again. I'm like, all right, I got to play tag again with my kid. Like that's great.
That's a great way to think about it, because I think about that too with my daughter. I'm like, what is she going to be into that I have no? Like, I'm certain it's going to happen. Like I know she'll be into some of the stuff myself or my wife are into or whatever, but I know there's going to be things that just come out of left field that I'm going to have to spend time on. So again, I love that positive mentality, that reframing. Like, oh, all right, yeah, just saying yes and being able to spend time with your kid. Okay, so I kind of ask this of all my guests. I feel like we've talked about a lot that can cover this topic, but I'm just kidding. And this is kind of meant to be an open question. If there's anything we didn't cover, you would really want to share. But I guess what encouragement or advice would you give, maybe from an athletic perspective, the urbanism perspective, anything you want to share, kind of like a open-ended question, whatever you'd want to encourage people with.
I guess my thing would just be to say, like everybody's listening to this, go walk around like your favorite neighborhood or whatever, and just like really look at it, and then realize that somebody planned and built that, and you can have a say in that. Like those were normal, regular people who shaped the city that now, like all the thousands or millions of people just go and experience. So I think I've said this a couple times, but we really do take for granted like the built environment, like the houses we live in, the streets we drive on, the sidewalks we walk on, etc. But somebody planned and built those, and you can have a part in doing that, whether it's becoming a developer or whether it's just advocating for like better stuff happening in your city, or whether it's becoming an architect or there's 1,000 different ways to like play a part in that process, but you can play a part in building the city that you want to live in. Like you don't just have to accept it or whatever, or even if it's great, you can play a part in making it better. So I would say just go look around your neighborhood, look around your favorite neighborhood, and then just realize like that was built by somebody no different than you and me, and you can do it too.
I love that. Where can people follow your work and get more connected?
I would say the best place is probably on X, formerly Twitter. Just Tesho13. But I'm Tesho13 on all social media. So you can. There's not that many Teshos out there anyway. So if you look up Tesho, you'll probably find me wherever I am. But yeah, on there, and then in real life, come find me at Camp North End. Like I'm there every day. I work there, obviously, but I love it there. So online, you can find me on X, but in real life, find me at Camp North End.
Score a goal in life and connect with Tesho. I don't know. I'm trying to make the soccer puns and the urban. I will say, I don't do a ton of podcast recording. I'm not like a super morning person because my work is like super flexible and I'm naturally a night owl. So I want you to feel somewhat honored that I'm like, yes, he wants to. I'm 100% there. So my brain is like not as sharp comedically as it might otherwise be to try and make some of those puns and connections. But
it's going to come on the way home. You'll be like, oh, there's the pun that I missed. Yeah.
That is 100% how it works with the podcast. I'll always be like leaving hours later. Oh man, I forgot I should have said that. I made it. And it's the way it works because I do stand-up comedy. It's the way it works with comedy sometimes. Like, oh man, I totally could have riffed on that. But get connected with Tesho. If I can spend like 10 seconds at the end here, just one more time, pumping you up and just saying on a personal level, I am passionate about the work you're doing. I think it's greatly important. I think that as we've talked more, we really connect and have a similar mentality in a lot of ways of just approaching life and relationships and thinking about infrastructure and neighborhoods and stuff. You have obviously put a lot more thought in and been way more intentional in a lot of that type of urbanism and building better neighborhoods. But it's something I've thought about a lot, just coming from the background I did of not personally having access to different things and resources. So I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate the work you do and how much I appreciate that, even that connection. Like the more I talk to pro athletes, like I don't take for granted the kind of intentionality and personal work that goes into crafting a legacy for yourself beyond the game. So I guess on a personal level, I just wanted to say thank you for the work you're doing.
I appreciate you saying that. I love it. So it's easier. It's not hard to do. That's what I say. Yeah.
Check out Tesho. Check out Camp North End. And Tesho, thank you again, my friend, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.